All right. Our next panel is going to spend a little time talking about some issues that are important here in Colorado in particular. Going to talk about some issues pertaining to the environment, pertaining to natural energy, pertaining to domestic energy, areas in which there are still a lot of really live policy debates, even among conservatives, about what the right way forward is with respect to a lot of the technologies that are currently being used to develop energy and to use it in this country. So we are delighted to invite some real experts to the stage. We have George Landrith of Frontiers of Freedom, John Fund, who's writing at the National Review these days, and Charlie Drevna from Fueling U.S. Forward. Guys, take it away.
Thank you. My name is George Landrith, and as he said, I'm the president of the Frontiers of Freedom Institute. We have a drawing, as you may have heard. At the end of our presentation, we will have a drawing for a free iPad, a new iPad, not a tablet of paper with iPad written on it, the Apple product. But you need to hand in a business card. I wouldn't write your name on a piece of paper because the person's going to stick their hand in it. It needs to feel like all the rest. So if you need to borrow a business card from somebody, do that and then stick around. You'll have a chance to win. We hope you'll be here for that. It's always fun to see someone not only appreciative of winning an iPad, but hopefully getting some good conservative information. I want to introduce our two other panelists just so that you know a little more about them. Charlie Drevna is the CEO of Fueling Us Forward. This is an advocacy group promoting smart technologies involving domestic oil and gas exploration. Charlie has over 40 years of extensive experience in legislation, regulatory, public policy, and marketplace issues. I just want to double check with it. This is the thing that advances things, right? Very good, okay. I want to make sure I wasn't pushing a wrong button that caused someone's seat to eject. At any rate, his previous positions include Director of State and Federal Government Relations at Tosco. He was also the Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs at the Oxygenated Fuels Association. He has held several positions at Sunoco, including Vice President for Public Affairs for Sun Coal Company, Director of Environmental Affairs for the National Coal Association, and he's been the Supervisor of Environmental Quality Control for Consolidated Coal Company. Now, John Fund is our other panelist. He is a national affairs columnist for National Review. I'm sure you've seen him on Fox News, probably not only recently, but probably this week. He has worked for the Wall Street Journal for more than 2 decades, starting in 1984. And he was a member of the newspaper's editorial board from 1995 to 2001. He has written for Esquire, Reader's Digest, Reason, and The New Republic. He co-wrote Cleaning House, America's Campaign for Term Limits with John Coyne, and in 2004 he wrote Stealing Elections, How Voter Fraud Threatens Our Democracy. He has written 2 books with Hans von Spakovsky at Heritage. He's actually a friend of mine, even though I stumbled a bit there. Who's Counting? How Fraudsters and Bureaucrats Put Your Vote at Risk. And also Obama's Enforcer, Eric Holder's Justice Department. So just to put in context the things we'll talk about today, you should understand that we'll have these 3 different topics. You may say, I'm not that interested in energy, or I'm not that interested in the topic of railway or high-speed rail or landfills. The reality is we're talking about bigger issues than that, and I hope you will see as we talk about these that we're going to get into some constitutional principles. We're going to get into how the left takes these issues and uses them to rob you, to steal opportunity in the future, and to make sure that the idea of constitutionally limited government dies. And I think that will become the important thread that puts all this together. So with that, I will sit down and turn the mic over to Mr. Fund. John, you're on.
I was muted because I was told I was second. All right.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was told I was second. Red state is at its best when it combines the power it has at the national level to organize and motivate activists with the local knowledge and the citizen activism of people at the local level. And many of you are involved in that. It's no news to you, you already know this, but as we all realize, the federal government, of course, is growing bigger and bigger, but where we can often make the biggest impact is locally, either at the state, the county, the city, or the regional level. The issue I'm talking about today, high-speed rail, is both a national issue, but it's also a local issue. In fact, it's being debated in Colorado as we speak. It all started with, of course, President Obama, who decided that he was going to have a $1 trillion stimulus package in 2009. A lot of it was going to go for shovel-ready jobs, remember? And even Obama had to admit, well, there aren't any shovel-ready jobs, and we didn't create many, which is why we have the long-term unemployment and the lowest labor participation rate that we have now. This has been the slowest recovery since 1949. Much of that money, about $10 to $15 billion, was earmarked for high-speed rail. Now, let me make it clear. I love trains. I've always loved trains. I grew up partly in Europe. I have European relatives. I live in the Northeast Corridor. I take the train from New York to Washington almost every week. I like trains. Trains often make great sense. Trains are part of our history. Many of us have a nostalgic attachment to trains. To this day, I remember with great fondness the ride I took on the California Zephyr through Grand Junction to California from Denver many years ago. But trains, as romantic as they are, also have to make economic sense if you're asking the taxpayers to pay for them. And what we saw with the Obama administration's high-speed train set was it didn't make sense. Within a year of it passing, the governors of Ohio, Wisconsin, and Florida, all new Republican governors, said, even though the federal government promises they're going to pay 90% of this, we're going to be on the hook for long-term losses because the ridership predictions never bear out. So they dropped the trains. One state, and you're going to guess which one it is, one state, which never found a federal program it wouldn't take money for, no matter how foolish, decided to take the federal money. And that state was, yeah, you got it, Governor Jerry Brown is in his second incarnation, and he loves boondoggles. They're his middle name. So the California voters had in 2008, the year Obama got elected, by 53 to 47, which is pretty close, they approved $8 billion in bonding for trains. Since then, it's been 8 years. The cost has gone up to north of $80 billion, which, by the way, is 40 times the annual budget of Amtrak. 40 times the annual budget of the entire passenger rail system today. Lots of long stories here, but in the end, they had to start building something by the end of last year or they would lose all the federal money. They had to build something. They couldn't build in Northern California because the environmentalists were suing. Couldn't build in Southern California because the cost of drilling through the Tehachapi Mountains was too great. So they had to build somewhere. They decided to build in the Central Valley, in the middle of nowhere. And I'm partly from the Central Valley, so this is not a slight on them. The train is going to go, the first stretch is about 30 miles, and it's going to go from Madera, that bustling metropolis of 31,000 people, to Firebaugh. Population 863. You can look it up. Firebaugh is a lovely spot on the road. I have nothing against Firebaugh, but the traffic between Firebaugh and Madera is not going to be great. Now, I think ultimately this train thing is going to be, a disaster. It already is a disaster. Unfortunately, the lesson has not been learned by everyone. Colorado is debating, CDOT here is debating, 2 high-speed rails, one from Fort Collins all the way to Pueblo, $15 billion, one from DIA, Denver Airport, all the way to Eagle County, $15 billion. Speed between 90 and 150 miles an hour, and of course there are all these benefits. But it's going to be $30 billion to build both sections. I doubt that will happen. But it's being debated right now. But the most active debate on trains is in Texas. In Texas, which is a very red state and a very free enterprise state, they've decided they need a new tactic. Rather than go to the taxpayers, the Texas Central Railroad claims, we can build a high-speed rail from Dallas to Houston with only private money, not a single dime of taxpayer money. It's going to cost only $10 billion. Well, already they've privately told investors, well, you know, we're not going to take any taxpayer money, but loans, on the other hand. Ron Kirk, the former mayor of Dallas, former Obama administration trade official, has told investors and told the public, well, we may apply for federal loans to build the railroad. There's been a lot of opposition to this railroad. One, because a lot of people don't think it'll be built, or if it is built, it'll be a section that is, you know, from whatever, Bug Tussle to Waco or whatever, and that's not going to help much. The other problem, of course, is eminent domain. Texas is a very private property-oriented state, and Texans really resent the fact that under one plan, there's one stop between Dallas and Houston, otherwise it just goes straight through. So what's in it for the rural counties? One county, Grimes County, has already said, we don't think you have the power to declare eminent domain and buy up properties to build your railroad, crisscrossing our counties. We're going to wait till the courts rule that you have eminent domain power before we let you build anything in our county. So it's going to be tied up in litigation. My view is this. I'm fine with high-speed rail. High-speed rail is wonderful. I love having the European taxpayers subsidize my high-speed rail travels in Europe. I would be happy to have it here. And if we could completely redesign the train corridors between New York and Boston and New York and Washington, we could have high-speed rail, and it would take about 50 years to build. I don't think high-speed rail works in this country at a cost that we want to pay for it, especially since the ridership projections are always way off, usually by a factor of 5 or 6. And if you actually believe that you will only have to charge $90 to take the high-speed rail from Los Angeles to San Francisco, I have several bridges in several states that don't exist that I can sell you. So in my view, if somebody wants to build this and actually has the money, they can do it, but show me the money. Show me the money, and I don't think they can, although I wish the Texas people, in theory, well. All of this goes back to the old saying that you've heard from Milton Friedman, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Well, there's ain't no such thing as a free choo-choo train. And we should recognize that. The time has come for us to realize we lose credibility every time we sign on to a project that frankly is for the upper middle class or above. It's for their convenience and their business schedules, and that we ask people who have median incomes or below average incomes to pay for it. You probably will never use it. This is what has fueled the rise of candidates like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. The sense that the system is rigged in some way to generate benefits to people on the top end of the income scale, whether it's people who want the benefits of free trade, even though I'm a free trader, or whether it's people who want to benefit from very fancy airports that the average person doesn't use very often, or high-speed rail, which is frankly a luxury good, especially since we already have a couple of things that serve people very well. Southwest Airlines is a high-speed transportation system that is 5 times as fast as Amtrak, often much cheaper, and the infrastructure is relatively limited other than the airport. It's called the air. It goes through the air. And you don't have to have eminent domain, you don't have to buy property, you don't have to have rights of way. You fly through the air. Now, Southwest Airlines makes money doing this. The other airlines make money doing this. Frontier makes money doing this, providing a good quality service in most cases for a reasonable cost. Why do we have to have taxpayers subsidize something that people aren't willing to pay for or invest themselves? It's that simple. So my view is trains, yes. Subsidies, no. Show me the money. And I'll make a prediction here and now. In California, we're going to have a museum, an outdoor museum, in about 3 years. You'll go out, way out in the middle past Fresno, turn left, go down to Firebaugh, and there'll be this hanging elevated railway that's about 25 feet off the ground. and it will stretch off into the horizon, but where you're standing, it'll just stop and just hang there. And around it will be this small little exhibit showing what the train would have looked like if it had been built. By the way, using technology that frankly is already 20 years out of date, because by the time you plan this train, by the time you actually build it, the technology has moved forward and you may want to try something else. You know, Elon Musk, whether he's accurate or not, wants a hyperlink. He believes you can actually build tubes and whoosh people from San Francisco and Los Angeles in 45 minutes. And he claims he can do it himself privately. I wish him luck too, and I hope he puts up the money for it. Although Tesla, not so much. We'll see. But you'll go to this museum and you will see that the 1,500 employees who are currently working at the California High-Speed Rail Authority wanted to keep their iron rice bowls in their jobs, and they couldn't bear to turn back the federal money because it would go back to Washington for other projects and they wouldn't have it. So they decided to build this Tinker Toy set in the middle of the Central Valley Desert, which is a desert now because of the drought and the fact that the feds have turned off all the water. And yeah, it will have probably employed 2,000 construction jobs for a year and a half, and it will leave this incredible monstrosity. How many of you know the poem Ozymandias? You know, it's the monument to the king in the desert. How do we remember Ozymandias? What are his monuments? And it's all set in a ruin in the desert. Look around you. Here they are. That's unfortunately what we're going to have with the California High-Speed Rail project. And the way to stop this in other states, whether it's in Colorado or in Texas or anywhere else, is if you have a great idea, it should be good enough to convince people to finance it privately. Show us the money. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about a landfill, and it's not your ordinary landfill. And you may think, landfills don't interest me. But this is a very important issue for this reason. It is emblematic of the clever ways that the left grows the government after massive government failures, which is kind of interesting. How do you massively fail and then talk the public into re-upping with you for another massive failure? But that's the first point. The second one is how they then shrink freedom and shrink the belief and the practice of limited government as found in our Constitution. And then thirdly, how they fit their hands into your pocketbook one more time. And I think it's important. So this story has a lot of these interesting elements. It has some elements of Congress being asleep at the wheel at times. It demonstrates, as if we needed more demonstrations of this, the EPA's failures. But the bottom line is it is emblematic of a much, much larger issue. Now, just a quick background. This is a landfill that was built, it was initially a stone quarry, limestone quarry, in the 1930s. By the 1950s, it had transitioned into a landfill. They dug a hole, now they're going to fill it back up. And they're filling it up, and then in the 70s, they put someone put some leached barium sulfate, which is a byproduct that came from the Manhattan Project. And while it's not highly radioactive, it's a little bit, problematic. You wouldn't want to put it on your cereal. I'm sure of that. But so in 1990, it's listed as a Superfund cleanup site. Okay, we're now in 2016, and they haven't done anything other than study the problem. So that gives you an idea of how efficient and quick they've gone, but it actually gets worse than that. So the locals don't like the landfill because, like all landfills, it smells a little bit, right? I've been to landfills, and if I want good smells, I go to the florist shop. I don't go to the landfill. But that's not actually a problem. It's not something that we need to engage. You kind of expect trash not to smell that good. But there is, of course, here a small, what they call underground fire. What you typically have when you have lots and lots of things that are decomposing deep down, you will get some heat residual from that heat buildup, and you'll get this, what's referred to as a fire. It's not really a fire, it's just some smoldering, but you can sometimes see that if you see big piles of pine bark mulch, and you'll see steam coming off of it, right? It's not that it's on fire, but you get the idea. And that's going on, and that has people worried, oh my gosh, there's an underground fire, and it's like that happens everywhere. But at any rate, the Center for Disease Control says it's not a problem. The Environmental Protection Agency says it's not. The Missouri State people say it's not. And the ultimate authority for all of us, I am sure, the Washington Post says it's not. So, anyhow, the EPA, of course, is now ready to fix the problem. They actually put together a plan after years of inaction to solve the problem. It was going to be enacted earlier this year. It would be completed by the end of this year, but it's on hold right now. But the locals are upset, and this kind of sets the stage for an interesting story. First of all, just so you know, the EPA's plan fixes the problems, and it won't cost taxpayers a dime. That's because Superfund requires the polluters to pay for it. And they're going to put a physical isolation barrier between the smoldering garbage and anything else like the barium sulfate and so forth. They're going to cap and encapsulate the radiological waste area. And then they're going to continually monitor this, largely in perpetuity, to make sure nothing changes and there's no problems. And it won't cost you and I money. You'd think that'd be good enough, but the problem, of course, is that the EPA has so insulted the locals that they're upset, because every time they went to ask why they couldn't get things moving along quicker, the EPA didn't just listen to them and ignore them. They actually said, we don't want to hear from you, and we're not talking to you, go away. And you can imagine after 25 years of that, they're angry, and their feelings are hurt. So that set the stage for some interesting politics and power grabs and the growth of government and all the things that I think get us exercised and frustrated. So Claire McCaskill put forth a bill. And her bill, of course, because the obvious answer to a problem that's been looking at for 25 years is to start over and restudy it some more, but that's what her plan is. And then they're going to have instead of the EPA being in charge, they'll have the Army Corps of Engineers be in charge. That, of course, they're trusted because the Army Corps of Engineers is usually viewed as more reputable, and they haven't spent the last 30 years bungling everything they've ever touched. The problem, of course, is, which the EPA, of course, has done, but the problem with the Army Corps of Engineers is the way they work, they have to hire union labor, which means the project immediately now costs a lot more. It just went up by 15, 20% at least, which, of course, is good for Claire McCaskill's re-election plans. And, but the frustrating thing is we pay for it, okay? $400 million we get to pay for. And that, of course, is after we postpone all of this for a decade or so. So kind of a dumb idea. She, of course, as all dumb ideas, it cannot bear scrutiny. So her plan in the Senate was, we will just put this, slide it on through, along with dumb things like National Donut Day, things that don't actually cost anything, things that no one actually cares about. No offense to donuts, because I love them. I think every day should be National Donut Day. But at any rate, the bottom line is, the plan here was just to kind of slip it by and nobody would look at it. Now, it's essentially an earmark, of course. That's how they used to work. We're fortunate that the House leadership said, no, we're not doing that. That's important. Now, the question is whether they'll stick with that or not. So my hope is that they will. Now, I realize, regular order sounds kind of inside baseball and your eyes glaze over. I got that. But you shouldn't glaze over to this. And that is this. Regular order is the idea that our government will operate as the Constitution envisioned it, with a vibrant debate going on in the House and the Senate, with checks and balances being in place to make sure that the proposals of the presidency or the administrative branch, the executive branch of the government are in order with what the public wants and in order with the Constitution, all those principles. It's about that. And too often in the last decade and longer, you have had Congress simply kind of operate on autopilot. So regular order, to me, is a return to our system of checks and balances in constitutional government. At any rate, as long as we do that, we'll be in a good position, because this can't stand up to... Now, if you see this picture here, I love this picture. That's not mustard flowing down a ravine. That's actually EPA water that they released when they were warned in advance that it would be a bad idea to do it. They did it anyhow. You may remember about a little less than a year ago, that was a big story. As I see it, one of the way we should reform this, in addition to going back to regular order and having Congress do its job and earn its pay, would be to allow states to take primary responsibility for cleanup in their own state. If this is a big deal, If this is a big deal in Missouri, I bet you the Missourians would have done something about it. But in EPA, you never know, right? The other thing, too, would be is to have the states be involved in overseeing Superfund and have EPA only deal with things that are truly federal in nature. Then that would be very limited, quite frankly. And John, by the way, has written on this. One of my frustrations is the left, quite frankly, pays lip service to the Constitution. This is the unvarnished truth, that for us, the Constitution is the standard by which good government is to be judged. For the left, the Constitution is an impediment to their political goals. And once we understand that, we understand the way they work. So I think that that's why the regular order is important, because it is a return to the constitutional government. So I want you to contact your legislators, anyone you have influence with, tell them, one, return to regular order, it matters. We need to have constitutional government. Secondly, no exceptions to that. And thirdly, H.R. 4100, the bill I'm talking about, should not be placed on any suspensions calendar. It shouldn't be greased and slid on through. It should be voted down, because it's a bad idea. Now, lastly, I want to thank you all for being here today, because you could have been a lot of places. It's summertime, it's August, this is the time of year we all go on vacation, go to the beach, whatever. Sit by the pool, do barbecues. And you're not there, you're here. And that, I want to tell you, is the kind of people that our founders were. They were well-to-do individuals who didn't need to go pick a fight with the king and risk hanging from a noose. But they went to some hot place in Philadelphia and declared independence, then later established a constitutional government that's worked pretty well for a long time. And they did that because they believed in opportunity and freedom. And I appreciate that you share that belief with them, and that's very important. So to you, I say thank you. With that, I am going to give the podium to our good friend, Charlie.
Before I forget, I want to echo what George just said. Thanks for being here. It's important. Let me get started by saying, first of all, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and you listened to one of the last panelists, and he grew up in Pittsburgh, and we all didn't leave, but a lot of us did. But, when I was growing up in Pittsburgh and going to school, I really had two desires as a child. One was I really wanted to go and be involved in some area, in some city where national and international and just vibrant, where things were being done on a national and international basis. The other part of me, the little boy in me, geez, going to the circus and doing that would be pretty cool. By going to D.C., I was able to achieve both dreams.
That's a good one.
So again, as we said, I've been in the energy business my entire career, spanning about 46 years now, and is nearly evenly split between the coal industry and the petroleum refining industry. And there's relationships between the two. I mean, hydrocarbons, energy. The commonality is that, and BTUs. The difference between these industries is the chemical bonds and the links between the hydrocarbon molecules. Now, before you all run to the door, I'm not going to give you an organic chemistry lecture, okay? And you can't leave anyway because you'll disqualify yourself for the iPad. So you're stuck with me. Now, my remarks today will concern links, but they're the links between what I believe between energy and economic strength for the United States and the free world she leads, or at least we used to lead. The link between energy and technological advancement, and the link between energy and human development and prosperity. So what's the landscape look like today? I hope we can all agree on a few basic precepts. As a people, we live longer and healthier lives than society has ever seen in history. Our quality of life is better naturally. We have more access to that technology I mentioned, and we are basically richer than ever before. Now, not everybody's rich, but as a world, we are basically, in a nation, we are basically richer than ever before. So what's the common thread that has made all this possible? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I maintain that it's access to and use of reliable, abundant, efficient, and sustainable fuels. And folks, those are fossil fuels. Unfortunately, the battle that, in the public perception battle, the energy industry has done a terrible job. I mean, we've done a damn awful job over the years. The public has been and will be, and it has been and will be permanently tied to our industry. But we need their support, not just their consumption. And what's happened over the years is that, for 4 decades, we have basically, not played the game. We've really let others define who we are. We have to change that. We've been engaged in what I would consider asymmetric warfare. The industry has, we fought the battles on Capitol Hill and with EPA and those clowns, and that transcends administrations, by the way. On short term, we fought the acid rain, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, cross-state pollution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And but on the other hand, so have our opponents. They fought us on those battles day to day too. But what they did something a lot more. They won the public policy debate, and they did it on a cultural and an emotional level. We didn't play in that game. We have to play in that game, and we have to get pretty quickly get good at it. We've been, as an industry, we've been questioned, regulated, investigated, analyzed, scrutinized, sued, generally bogged down by procedures and restrictions that continually grow more complicated. And too doggone often, we are our own worst enemy, because here's what we do. We negotiate with ourselves. Let me a little demonstration. Here comes maybe it's carbon tax or cap and trade on climate change. We start out over here. Our opponents start out over here. So we all get together, not them, ourselves, and we move here. And they stay there. And we move here. And they stay here. And we get together again and have another damn meeting. And we move here. And they say, look at those clowns. They start moving even further to the left. And we do that. I've worked in this industry for decades, and I've seen this struggle from inside out. We can't do that. I mean, a carbon tax. Whoa, gee, it's only going to be $20 a ton. Do you think a tax at $20 a ton today is going to stay at $20 a ton forever? Come on. Cap and trade. Well, let's take it to 10%. Right. They're going to keep moving, and we keep negotiating. Winston Churchill once said, an appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile hoping it'll eat him last. And that's what we do. We're good at that. So why am I here? And I'm not, Admiral Stockdale. What's been lacking, I believe, is a public education initiative that tells the real story about fossil fuels and how important they are to our future. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with our relatively new organization called, Fueling Us Forward. Well, we view energy not simply as a matter of dollars and cents, but as rather it's a pro-human issue. It's an issue about enriching and saving lives. So, to many people, fossil fuels and oil and natural gas have been framed in the worst case scenario as evil. The best case scenario is it's a necessary evil. And maybe it's a bridge to nirvana. Well, nirvana, they ain't going to come. So we're not. Fossil fuels aren't a life-threatening addiction, but rather they're a life-enhancing resource. So we're going to go on the offensive, and we're going to tell the real story. Now, again, and we've either dug or drilled our way, pardon the pun, for the last 40 years into this hole because we haven't fought on that cultural and emotional level. So we're going to make the case for fossil fuels, and this is not a campaign built around an election cycle or or individual policy battles, some of those that I mentioned. And we're not a political or lobbying organization. Listen, after running a major trade association in D.C. for 9 years, I was there for 15. Yeah, I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. People are going to do that. This organization has to be different. There are other groups out there that are still going to do that, and that's very necessary. But if we're successful, and it's going to take some time, this is not going to turn this ship around. If we're successful, it's going to make those battles perhaps less daunting for everyone else. So what's our message again? We believe it's unique. We want to focus on some folks will focus on the tangible things like prices, job creation, tangible other tangible things like that. And as a matter of fact, we heard this morning what Morgan from Chevron was talking about. And doggone it, that's great. and they're going to fight that battle on those specific issues. We got to elevate this thing. We got to, again, take it to the emotional, the personal level. So we're going to present a pro-human case for fossil fuels. Energy is essential. That energy is the essential element of human potential and well-being, and that having that access to reliable, affordable, abundant, and sustainable energy is the nucleus of that element. So oil and natural gas, they're not the fuels of the past or just maybe the present or a necessary evil. They are the future. They are the future of this country. And again, shame on us. We've done a damn lousy job of telling people that. Yes, we're pro fossil fuel. We're not going to hide that. But we're not here to attack other energy sources. Energy use should be based upon sound economics, sound science, and focus on what's best for improving the people's lives. All energy sources have pros and cons. That's undeniable. But we need a sustainable energy to ensure the future of the country. Stated another way, and you've heard this throughout the conference, we're not opposed to biofuels. We're not opposed to wind energy. We're not opposed to solar. We're not opposed to magic beans. What we oppose is unwarranted government intervention. Have you heard this? You heard it. Rapid trains. You heard this. All this morning you heard about the crony capitalism. That's what we're opposed to. The government shouldn't be in the energy marketplace. They shouldn't be in any other marketplace for that matter, because look at it. And you're going to hear this again from me. The government favoring one industry over another by picking winners and losers, they've got a doggone good record of picking the loser. So, for the preordained politically correct business, there are subsidies, mandates, and insulation from risk through federal loans or guarantees on very favorable terms. They are more than happy to take the risks that the private sector won't. Because a poor commercial risk remains a poor commercial risk, whether it's private enterprise or government investors, you, me, using our tax dollars who take it. It's frustrating, it's wrong, and it makes no sense. Again, several of the panelists yesterday, with Katie's panel on Obamacare, and then talking about, the crony capitalism. You had Glenn Beck yesterday talking about, a lot of things. I thought it was a tremendous talk, but he talked about principles. He talked about having principles. You don't have principles, you don't have anything. And so I'm an equal opportunity critic. Again, I'm just as critical of my own industry as I am of the environmental left. So let me give you an example of why I'm so angry at some of the folks. There was last year, toward the end of the session, we had the big debate about whether to export oil or not to export oil. Well, a decade ago, that would have been unheard of. Gee, what happened in a decade? We went from an energy-poor country to an energy-rich country. And when you look at our combined oil and gas production, we outdo Saudi Arabia and we outdo Russia. Again, combined. We have the ability to make OPEC, NOPEC. So what happened last year? People wanted oil. We have oil. We can export it. Fine. That's a free market approach. Vote on it. Use your Congress. So what did our conservative guys do? They couldn't get it through. All right, bring it up again next time, because if you look at at prices where they were, you weren't going to export a damn thing anyway. What did they do? They caved to say, we'll give us oil exports and we'll give you the extenders for wind and solar and all the other stuff on the tax extenders. After I left I was the head of the association that ran, we represented all the refiners and all the petrochemical manufacturers, AFPM. I wrote an op-ed for The Hill. I called it "For Less Than 30 Pieces of Silver." And that's how I felt. What my own industry, some in my own industry, and some conservative Republicans did to They traded their principles, and you can't do that. And I'm still angry about it to this day. But again, we're going to promote fossil fuels. We're going to continue. Now, what's our strategy, though? I got a couple more minutes. What's our strategy? A positive message. Now, I've worked, and I'm a recovering chemist. I've worked with a bunch of engineers all my life, and they bring stuff to me. Talk about barrels, BTUs, charts, data, graphs, slide sheets, regression analysis. Here, Charlie, take us up to the hill. They'll read this and they'll be with you. Yeah, right. Let me give you an example of why that doesn't work. This is about 12, 13 years ago. This is not an example on energy, but I think it's informative. Our good friend, Dick Armey, back then, he's still our good friend, Dick Armey, on split screen, some early morning talk show, I'm sitting there eating my Cheerios. He's talking about the school lunch program. He starts off and he starts talking about 90 to 120% of the poverty level versus the per capita cost per student versus this versus that versus how much chalk they bought last year. I don't know. Man, your eyes glazed over. I mean, he was probably right. The statistics were right. The other guy, and I don't know who it was, some Democrat was there. All he did, he holds up a bottle of ketchup and he points to it and he says, they want to classify this as a vegetable. Game, set, match, folks. It was over. This is how we have to fight. We have to fight we have to make it personal. We have to make it emotional. We have to bring it home to people. So this is what we're going to do. And we're partnering with other organizations too, especially non-traditional allies like the minority community. Who in the heck gets hit hardest and fastest when there's an energy shortage or prices go up? They do. Their congressmen, their senators keep voting for this stuff, though. Can't happen. We've got to change that. So what can you do? I encourage you to visit our website, www.fuelingusforward.com. I encourage you to work with us. I encourage you to take action because you're action people. You wouldn't be here if you're not action people. So I appreciate it, and thank you very much, and answer any questions you have.
All righty. We've got to do that drawing. It looks like I think we've probably run out of time for questions. This is the iPad. It's still in its wrapper, shrink wrapped and everything. We didn't go to the airport and lift it out of someone's baggage.
Are you going to look for it?
Pay no attention to that hand.
Oh, here we go. Charlie, why don't you
Now I know I won't see him.
pick one out?
Yeah.
What a surprise. All right.
Okay.
Now remember, you gave me two, so.
Well, okay.
Remember, you must be present to win. A couple people left out, so here we go. Melanie Rhodes.
Melanie Rhodes. Thank you all. Our time is up, but our panelists will be around, and if you have any questions for us, I am sure we'll be happy to entertain them. Thanks so much for being here.